Sorry, John, didn't quite hear you. Did you say, how are you? I'm good.
Yes, how are you?
Oh, feeling good. Yeah. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. And we're kind of coming out of a lockdown and going into tiers or something, but let's see how that works out. We're not going crazy yet, anyway. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, we're out of lockdown. So,
yeah, yeah, it's nice. I saw the photographs of people going shopping in Ireland. That was lovely to see. And yeah, poor me, Martin was videoed buying presents. So whoever he's buying the presents for, they already know what he's getting. Anyway, just for the audience, thank you for watching here with Haydn Shaughnessy, who's partnered with Finn Goulding on a couple of flow books, and they have Flow Academy. But more recently, there's a new book which is Transformation Sprint, and I got to be honest, I thought it was going to be like just a follow up of the two fantastic books, but I thought it was just going to be rehashing a content or whatever. But there's actually a lot of new stuff in here, and we're going to talk about that this evening. But first of all, just to introduce how I met Haydn. I met Haydn 20 years ago. We both had startups at the time, and we collaborated for a few years. We kind of kept in touch over the years, but it was really only the last couple of years that we kind of got back in touch again. And I was really enthused by how Haydn had kind of evolved himself over the years. I'm delighted to have Haydn on the show again today. Haydn, how would you describe yourself to the audience? I mean, when you talk to people, like, and people ask you what do you do, like, what do you say to them?
yeah. Well, first of all, I'd say that's a long story. But going back to when we met, just tell everybody out there, John's one of the great educators in software. And in our first meetings, John taught me about software and was really the most patient and eloquent teacher that I've ever come across. So kudos. So in my work I do, originally I was a broadcast journalist, but I got the opportunity to work in satellite technology when I was changing careers when I was around about 30. I was involved in managing downstream satellite application projects, which was a really fascinating area at the time because there were no commercial downstream satellite applications. It was all military. Of course, now we take satellite for granted. After I'd done that, and here's another interesting fact actually, I started to work on innovation projects. One of them was actually driverless cars. Going back 30 years ago, we were already looking at how you would have driverless convoys on motorways. And then over the succeeding years, I did a number of projects like that, which were trying to look at the application of new technologies, not developing the technology, not developing the software, but asking questions about what society would do with them. And I got the opportunity through that to start looking at corporate strategy and also how corporate operating models would have to change in order to accommodate these technologies. And that's pretty much what I've been doing ever since. I've been involved in a lot of American think tanks, looking at what the next 2 or 3 years, or maybe 5 years of enterprise structures and strategies will look like because of new technologies. And I've done a lot of work on my own account, looking at new applications. When you and I met, I was doing a social search product, for example. And I've done a lot of work in IP, intellectual property products like investment indexes. I developed an index for how you make assessments of fintech if you're a bank or an insurtech. How do you assess whether that fintech is a good fit for you and has competency to deal with you over years rather than just the next 6 months? So I've done a lot of product development. And so I start to describe myself as somebody that does a lot of thought leadership around how corporate strategy and structure needs to respond to technology. But I'm also, I think, at the heart of it, I'm somebody who's very heavily involved in product.
Yeah, thanks, Haydn. And how did you get involved with Finn? Because you wrote a couple of books with Finn. This is the third book, I believe. Were there more than, was it the 2 flow books, right, plus this one?
Well, we've been working together for a few years now. I met Finn when I was taking a group of bankers, banking executives, I suppose you'd have to call them, from London on a tour to find out what was DevOps all about. What were the best companies in Europe doing with their IT shops? And at the time, Paddy Power was probably one of the best examples. You could probably say there were a couple of others that were doing a lot of interesting stuff around continuous integration and continuous deployment. But Paddy Power had something else going on, and they were doing that, and they were doing DevOps, but they were also doing wonderful things. Like, for example, they had at that stage, I think, 7 million price changes every Saturday afternoon. Kind of incredible performance characteristics of their IT shop. So I took these bankers along to Paddy Power, and we sat in Finn's office, which was actually a fake stadium. He'd put some of that artificial turf in there and had a bank kind of grandstand, and we all sat around and had a good giggle about that, and just generally enjoyed an afternoon work talking with people who were at the top of their game. So after that, we kept in touch, and over time, I think what we realised was that his ability to affect change in an organisation, and the studies I was doing of change, and the attempts I was making to persuade people to change, meant we were kind of representing both sides of the house, whether on my side, the business, on his side, IT. If we could bring those two things together, maybe we'd crack some of the most pressing problems in organisations. And that's effectively what we set out to do with Flow. If you read the Flow books, they're really about that. They're not a hard sell, like we are going to show you how to solve the IT business divide, but they really are visualizations, a way of saying, if we can create the right conversations, there should be no divide.
And one of the things I attended a couple of your courses, Haydn, and one of the courses Finn was co-training as well. And one of the things I didn't cop on, I guess, when I was reading the books was not only do you have a whole load of cool visualizations, like the cool wall and the issues wall and the exec wall and the risk wall and all these kind of things, really very clever visualizations. But also it was the approach to market segmentation that you were. We often hear people saying you should be trying to find your micro niche, but you almost had something out of the box that would help people to find little niches. I think you gave me an example of people selling €1 million, £1 million pensions when maybe they didn't need £1 million pensions, and there was a niche in the market where you could sell a different kind of pension. I found that really intriguing. So, have people been latching onto Flow, and have they been latching onto it from the point of view of market segmentation, or are they using it for different purposes?
Well, I think first of all, Flow is becoming more popular by the day. I think yesterday we sold 20 books online, which is amazing for a book that's 4 years old and self-published. So it continues to sell, and it's selling more, and we're getting more and more inquiries about Flow, even though we've written Transformation Sprint. Transformation Sprint is about Flow in a way. It's very personal to Flow. But what's really interesting is that momentum is building behind Flow. I think going to the market segmentation, what people are beginning to realise is that a lot of the innovation that's taking place is, the word I use for it is promiscuous. There's too much sex, there's too much innovation, and this is what Lean Startup did to us. Lean, fast, fail, cheap. Lean Startup, ideation platforms, ideas. All that goes into a funnel, and then people start trying to say, does it make sense? Is it something that we really need? Is there value in it? And it's catastrophic for a lot of organizations. You already have in most organizations dysfunctional IT departments because of core platform incompatibilities or core platform problems that have accumulated over years. We know that most of those departments, 75% of budget goes on managing the estate. Now you're pushing more and more and more innovation into it. Makes no sense whatsoever. What the market segmentation does, and the other thing around it, the Kate value wheel, is to say, actually, you can validate a lot of this stuff beforehand. You can validate precisely who you're doing your innovation for, and you can figure out what assets you've got that can already serve that innovation. So if you remember, it was not just the segmentation, it was also about asset discovery.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that kind
We
of
had a lot in common there. Yeah.
well, that kind of work is now evolving in product discovery, because there are now platforms that give you customer insight. I don't think they give you customer insight in the way that the segmentation work does that we do, and I think the segmentation work's really important. I haven't sold it enough. I think we should do more around it, but we've been very busy. We've been actually overloaded with work the last 3 years.
It's a nice problem to have. Yeah, that really struck me as well about flow. That, and John Seddon would be kind of in your camp here as well, in that there's a lot of value inside the building. We're constantly looking for the next curve, which is good. It's a good thing to do. Don't get me wrong. You don't want to kind of end up kind of left to the side of the road kind of thing. But yeah, there could be assets within the company that we're not really leveraging. We're not getting the value out of them,
Well,
and
I think
so
the things when people talk about product discovery is they miss out this wider value picture. And you're right, there's one thing is what assets do we have already that we can deploy and solve a problem or create success. I think that's the important thing that we've been talking about for years. You have to think about how you create success for customers, not just can I deliver customer satisfaction. But if you look inside the organization, we find often that people sometimes have even got the product. You know, they've done the product 2 years before and forgotten about it, or the product managers moved on and it's somewhere buried in Jira. But the other thing about it is very often people are just not communicating the value of what they've done. So take Microsoft Word as the classic example. There is a piece of data somewhere that says the vast majority of people, something like 90% of people, use only 5% of Word. That's a classic value problem. Microsoft needs to get out, rediscover the value of that package and start communicating it to people. You don't need to innovate it anymore. You need to actually understand your customers and understand how to communicate the value of those various elements to those different segments.
So I'd like to move on to the book, Transformation Sprint. And I really enjoyed reading it. It didn't take me long to read it. I think it was like 2.5 sittings kind of thing to go through it. Very digestible, very actionable. And just a few spoiler alerts that we're going to get into for the audience. First thing that struck me about this is you could use this essentially as a tactic or a strategy actually to deal with a lot of the changes going on in your organization that maybe mightn't be going the way we all hoped. You could be at the early stages, you could even be in the middle of it, you could even be trying to recover something that's already maybe not gone so well. And what really struck me about this book was a lot of people are doing transformations, they're using agile or they're using pick your poison, what kind of approach they're using, Spotify, Safe, whatever. There's kind of siloed approaches to delivering value. There's actually, and while we say that 70% of changes fail, actually a lot of change still actually manages to happen, which is that kind of came true, and that kind of makes a lot of sense to me. But really, what this book is all about is, from what in my own words, I guess, and maybe you could kind of correct me on this. It gives you something. It gives you It gives you a toolbox to grab a change that's going on, or even a set of changes that are going on. Grab the bull by the horns. Try to bring it in some sense in a transformation sprint, which is kind of inspired by the Google design sprint. And then what you do is during that first month or whatever, you create a lighthouse project, which is like a kind of a scaled down version, because a lot of our problems kind of come from having programs that are too big. So something really small where the issues are isolated, people are aligned to what the issues are, and they go together to work on that. And what struck me about it is you could almost use it for any change. And
Yeah.
so what I'm curious about, Hayden, is like what inspired you to come up with this? I mean, how did you come up with the idea that, using something based on a Google design sprint, for example, and the Lighthouse project idea, where did they come from?
Well, it comes from the experience of watching people inside transformations never being able to have the right conversations. So if you look at them, and we've been inside quite a lot of organizations where you see people often knowing what's wrong, or different people in that environment have a different perspective on what's wrong. None of those perspectives are necessarily wrong perspectives. People seem to have an intuitive grasp of, if this changed, it would be much better. In the meantime, though, what's actually happened is you've got a bunch of consultants come in, done 6 to 9 months worth of work, created this enormous program, and managers then start to behave like managers behave when schedules start to go wrong. If you start to see a schedule slip, managers start to micromanage, start to insist more and more on the deadlines, and it becomes very conflict laden, very conflictful. So we were witnessing that time and time again, and we're scratching our heads trying to find a way to solve it, because when we go in, we're talking about flow, and what we want is for people to use flow as a way to initiate value and deliver value at the other end, create the feedback loops that allowed you to do a lot of improvement on the back of that. So that's our basic desire when we go in and work with companies. But we were finding this kind of mess, a lot of dysfunctionality that exists anyway, getting worse and worse and worse as transformation programs become very deadline driven. So how do you find an answer to that? And what we were starting to do, it was born out of practice. We started to say to companies, we'll come in just for a month, because we wanted to counter this idea that, as we don't call ourselves consultants, by the way, we call ourselves practitioners, but we wanted to counter the idea that as practitioners stroke consultants, we were going to be in there for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, that we were going to land and expand. So we started to offer it, first of all, before we described it. And over the course of 2 or 3 projects like that, we started to refine a technique. And the 6 steps in the transformation sprint are really born out of that experience, living it over the course of a 4-week period. What do you have to get done, and what can you achieve? If you say, I'm going to time box it, if you want me out after 4 weeks, I'm gone. If you want me to stay on and do some more and help you further, that's fine as well. But we promise you, we'll deliver you something in 4 weeks.
I'll just bring up a couple of comments there, Hayden, before we maybe go through this, some of the 6 steps. Bit of humor from Matthew Evans. And got a comment from Chimpanzee. A lot of scaling frameworks are starting to align towards the same approach. And then there's a quote, get the hell away from anything that resembles Spotify or Safe. Thank you for that comment. So Hayden, what would be the 6 steps? Like what these steps over that 1 month? How does that work?
I'll explain that to you. Just responding to that comment, actually.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that many companies move away from Spotify or Safe. I think people are beginning to realize that Spotify is a special case in the sense that, if you look at what Spotify does as an overall ecosystem model, it's very, very interesting and actually well worth copying in some respects. But the whole idea of the guilds and tribes, I guess I haven't seen people move away from that. I've seen them latch onto it, actually. And we see Safe becoming more and more embedded. We see people in those organizations wishing to hell they weren't in that situation. But it'd be interesting to hear of some examples where companies have actually said no to scaling frameworks, no to Safe, no to Spotify. We just haven't seen it. The gender shift and how do they compare? Not really that familiar with the gender shift, to be honest. Is that Mike Burrows?
It's Mike Burrows' work. Yeah, Carl Scotland is involved with that as well.
Yeah.
It's got there's I hope I don't give the wrong impression, but basically it's a very well thought through body of knowledge, and essentially there's lots of tactical workshop approaches you can use, very similar to the transformation sprint, in that helping the leadership to align and the direction they want to go to and moving them forward, so on. But it does have kind of some short-term interventions, that also has a kind of a longer-term journey thing as well. So, Carol, I'm not sure if Haydn is up to speed on that, but I'm happy to bring Haydn up to speed on that maybe afterwards. And that whole world, it's getting much more popular.
Yeah. Well, I know of Mike. I don't know of the agenda shift methods. I can explain what we do, and then whoever Carl can answer the question for himself. So the thing that we found most important is that the perspectives of different people in these programs are often overlooked. And you've got people who are going into work and often walking into dysfunctional environments that are becoming more conflictful. And they have really interesting perspectives. What tends to happen, though, is that the senior management believe they have the single source of truth, or they are the single source of truth. They've got the program, they've worked it out with the consultants, they are going to implement. So step one for us is always about gathering those perspectives. Senior management resist that. So when you say something, the first thing you want to do is talk to people at various levels of your organization. There's a tendency to say, well, you're going to pick up on the moaners, but actually we know what we're doing, we know what's wrong in our organization, that's why we've got the transformation program. But once you actually begin and start talking to people, you find that there are very varied perspectives on what's actually wrong. And some of those can be extremely important in defining the next step or the next best step. That process is also really important in bringing a group of people behind you when you're trying to do a lighthouse project. So you're doing what we say in flow. You're actually building the opportunity for much richer social interaction, first of all, between you and those people, and then within the lighthouse project. So step one would be that, all about perspective gathering. Step two, what we do is we would imagine that in most cases, in most companies, there are probably, say, between 18 to 25 problems that companies share. If you're company X, you might be struggling with 10 of those problems. If you're company Y, you might be struggling with a different 12 of those problems. Those similarities are not enough that you can impose a model, like a Spotify model, on that organization. But they're similar enough that you don't have to do the analysis every time over and over again. So what we've done in the book is provided a list of what we see as, I think we've put 17 of them in there, 17 of the problems that we encounter most often. And they're a kind of a start. That's the idea of the sprint, that if you go in and say, I've got to discover what your problems are, that's taking months. If you're saying, I need to discover which of this set of problems is most pressing for you, then you can do it in a couple of weeks. So that's step two. And we also do a lot of analysis of things like the technical architecture. Say we, the royal we, Finn does analyses of the technical architecture, technical strategy, those types of things. And again, what we provide in the book is a list of things that you would typically find, signals that you can look for that tell you what kinds of things are likely to be going wrong in the technical side of the business. So we try and bring those two things together in an issues document. And we release the issues document on day 2. So when we're working with a sponsor, and whoever the sponsor wants to release that document to, as of day 2, they're already starting to see the results of our work, or the outputs of our work. So we're interacting with the sponsor over the first 14 days as those issues come in, starting to understand what the politics of those issues are. If there are some issues arising that we're just not going to get any positive response from executives on how to manage that. So we're learning the politics of the organisation while we're setting out the issues, and we prioritise those issues.
So is that from the interviews, Haydn? Is like the issues, are they shown on day 2 or week 2?
The minute we start to look at the documentation, we generally get the documentation in advance. Day one, like on day 1, we're already interviewing people. So on day 2, we'll start to put an issues document together. We're really trying to do this quickly. We don't want to wait 2 weeks before we start exposing the work. we certainly don't want to get to the end of the month before we expose it. So no, it's day 2 onwards.
Yeah, and I noticed as well you're trying to smell the BS as well through the interviews and the agendas that people might be trying to put forward, so to speak. You're trying to see through what's going on,
Yeah.
Yourself and Finn, and then at the end of a 2 week period, you there's some kind of playback. Is that, or am I getting the timing wrong?
We are also trying in that time period to describe what generally is referred to as the as is and the to be environment. So when you do transformative work, as you know, that consultants will often say, this is your as is, this is your current state. This is the target operating model, your to be. Now, what we've said in the book, and it's something that, again, it's arisen from experiences, there is no target operating model, really. You can fortune on describing it, but what you really need to do is to understand what it might be. And understanding what it might be is the purpose of the Lighthouse project. So what we're trying to get through this work, and I'll describe some of the other steps in a second, but for the moment, at the end of the process, we've got a Lighthouse project.
Right.
The idea of the Lighthouse project is to learn what is an appropriate target operating model for you. Not only what's the appropriate target operating model for you, but what skills do you need to get to it? What skills do you have? And what gaps do you need to fill? So that's the end point. The start point is always analysis. The end point is the ability to learn about change, the ability to learn about the changes you need, and do that through a working project, Lighthouse project. In the middle, we do some prioritization work with executives. Yes, we have a feedback or playback session with executives where we do a number of things. We have to use the usual flow techniques of visualizing those issues, visualizing priorities, visualizing the as is and the to be. But what we are also trying to do in that workshop is expose senior executives to all the dirty washing that is filtered out of their work. So when you go and when you do those interviews, you pick up a lot of stuff around what's wrong. Most executives haven't heard it because most negative messaging gets filtered before it gets to the executive level.
Yeah, it does, of course. Yeah.
So we expose that to them, and we also expose a lot of the dysfunctionality. Again, they're not aware of it. I think you get instances where executives are not aware of what projects they've sponsored. They've got stuff going on over one part of the organisation. They've got something almost identical going on somewhere else, both fully funded. Things like that emerge that are really quite shocking to executives. You know, the fact that they are managing dysfunctionality to the degree that they are is something that is new to them. And generally speaking, we find they react very positively to that. Slightly embarrassed at the same time, but they do react positively in the sense that they know it's their responsibility to clear that up.
So that's a skill in itself, isn't it? Because when you know the messenger could get shot, right? So what kind of techniques have you had to use to avoid getting shot, so to speak? You know, probably calling out maybe some not so popular messages, or maybe it's not even a surprise. Maybe it's a complete shock to people, and they're almost in denial about what news you've got. Has that happened, and how have you dealt with it if you have?
There is denial in executive teams about things that they're doing. It's not something that I think you can have a formula for managing. You know, what we do present to them is we will set out in the slide deck. We'll set them out almost like newspaper headlines, and so we'll produce tweet length quotes from people. This is the good news. Now this is the bad news. And very often, what we find is sometimes surprising what executives don't like to hear. As an example of that, we, as part of our feedback to one executive team, gave them a number of quotes about how much people liked going into work every day, which is great. But the reason was because it was not a very demanding environment. And that's actually quite a shocking thing for an executive to hear, that they're creating a place that is so undemanding that people almost feel like they're on holiday when they go in through the doors. So, things like that, we can't really solve that problem, but it's interesting for them to hear it. What's more problematic is when you get things like they've got lots of replication. So you're duplicating effort, duplicating projects, and sometimes replicating projects. And that is something we can do something about, because what we're trying to say to them is, forget about your target operating model, think about a generative operating model. And what we mean by the generative operating model is that the Lighthouse project gives you the opportunity to generate operating model ideas, operating model priorities, and the skill to remodel your organization. One of the things that we've found in organizations is there's nobody responsible for learning how to remodel. So a lot of change happens. It happens in sometimes a planned or a haphazard way, but it often is also very siloed. So there's nobody with an overview of that saying, given all these changes, we're probably moving to a data-driven operating model. Or given all these changes, we'd probably be better making this more coherent through a platform and ecosystem operating model. I know what one of those is, and I know how to get to one. So what tends to happen instead, and stop me if I'm gasping on, John, but what tends to happen is you see change everywhere in organizations. One of the things that we thought at the very start of our work was that change was more about the software department. Software people change all the time. New languages, new tools, new ways of working. They become very, very accomplished at it. Resistant in some ways as well, let's face it, but software is really good. And we were thinking, it's the problem with the business. The business doesn't change. But actually, if you look at marketing was started with, say, 10, 15 years ago, social media marketing. Now they've got to push through channels like Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook. Inside those channels, they've got huge segmentations, whereas you used to just do the brand advertising. Now they might have to push through not just these channels, but through all kinds of segments within those channels. They need to create more and more content. They've got to do more content management. They've got to do more monitoring, work with influencers. They've got to try and elicit content from people. That's a vastly different world. So they've been changing like crazy. Product people have been changing like crazy from the start of open innovation all the way through to working with lean startup and lean UX. Product people have been changing. The irony is that nobody has that overview that says, look at all this change that we've been doing. Can we make this more coherent? Instead, what we've got are silos of change that are probably making the dysfunctionality worse rather than better.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to address some of the comments for now. So Carol came back. Thank you, Carol. I've got a question from Shibu. Says it's more of a comment really. It's all inspect and adapt based on the current situation project. Do we really need defined steps for transformation?
I don't think we do need defined steps for the transformation. I think that through the Lighthouse project, you can start to explore what those steps might be, and you can explore what the skills are that are going to take you to some new operating model. What you do need, though, at least some steps, and I hate to use the word framework, but some steps that allow you to get to that Lighthouse project. Because if you're not going to take step one of gathering those perspectives, and step two of analyzing, and step three of describing your operating model, then it's difficult to know how you would start on the transformation pathway at all.
Yeah, thank you. And Matthew is a regular on the show. He was actually live with us last week. Hi, John Haydn. I'm really interested in step 5, criteria for prioritization.
Yeah, well, we tend to think in terms of, is it high value or is it high complexity? Is it low value or low complexity? And what's the combination of those? Can I get to something which is a low complexity project with high value? Probably not. But what I don't want is a low value project that's highly complex. So trying to describe your project, describe your lighthouse options in terms of really most bang for the buck, and most bang for the buck being the most I can learn about what kind of transformations I really need and do that in a low complexity environment. That's what you should prioritize.
Yeah, and what I noticed as well is sometimes it was high value and high complexity, but your approach is try to simplify that. Like for example, if it was machine learning or something, rather than kind of investing 1 billion in machine learning, it might be can we do some tactical thing with machine learning in the next month or something like that.
We're very much
Yeah,
next month. Can we get? Don't describe
yeah,
a project in typical project management terms where you've scheduled it all out. You've got your Gantt chart. You've got your
yeah.
milestones, deliverables. Say to yourself, can I describe my project so I get value in the next 2 weeks or the next 4 weeks and every 2 weeks after that?
Thank you. Chimpanzee came back. It's a very nice book. I love that it uses language like such as changing the operative method rather than introducing agile. That was actually one of my eureka moments as well while I was reading the book. It kind of broke my brain a bit because you mentioned a few times in the book that people are looking for new business models. You know, we got the business model canvas, the lean canvas, you know, fitting the funnel, as you say, all that kind of. They all have value. They do have utility. But the point that you made in the book is often what's needed is not a new business model. It might be a new operating model. Can you talk more about that, Hayden, and what you actually meant by that?
Yeah. So if you go back to the 1990s, most change in organizations was really about the operating model. So, yeah, it was the operating model. So you go back to business process re-engineering, and of course
Yeah,
you had the ERP come out the back of that, supply chain management, global supply chain structures and tiers, those types of things were all about the operating model. Probably overdone. I think that some of the software platforms that supported that were too constraining. But what we did in 2000 is we started to say, let's go to open innovation. Do you know there's a piece of research, and I'll just digress a few seconds. There's a piece of research published in the last couple of months which shows the decline in corporate R&D expenditure and its impact on productivity. Corporate R&D is being closed down left, right, and centre because people now think you can do it in a lean startup way. And that started with open innovation. Get somebody else to do it. Now it's, well, let's just spin up an idea and see where it goes. See if we can spin up a new value proposition. And actually, we're missing a lot of fundamentals because of that. A lot of fundamental learning used to be in the R&D department. Now it'll be in a lab or an accelerator and those types of things. That's my rant. But that's all part and parcel of business model innovation. So it's about, can I sell in a new way? Or can I reframe my proposition? You know, it's quick and easy. It's not, here's an example. Nespresso took 13 years to succeed. It's just a cup of coffee, but it took 13 years to get that thing right. And that's what companies used to do. Now you'd probably get 6 months, and if that didn't work as an MVP, it's gone. So we are actually, I think, in the process of wasting value all around the place because of business model innovation. Every business model innovation worth its salt needs operating model innovation as well. And what I mean by operating model innovation, it'd be best described by BMW. BMW as an example of it. BMW want to move towards mobility rather than cars. Every automaker wants to do that. They want to have you, they want to support you in all the kind of physical movement that you need to make your life successful, rather than just get you to buy a car. In order to do that, they think they need 15,000 new software developers. So here's the difference. Getting you to subscribe to a BMW mobility service is the business model. Supporting that, actually creating the infrastructure and the services to support that over time, is going to take 15,000 new people. That's the operating model. And they're basically software. I actually think it's far too many if they really think that they're going to be efficient with 15,000 developers.
yeah,
They're mistaken. But, you know, the principle is that's the operating model. And very few organizations are as sharp as that, acknowledging so early on that to achieve their business model objectives, they need a new operating model.
thank you. Minton saying hello. Hi, Minton. He's on the show quite a lot. Thank you for that. Chimpanzee came back. So how do we get large orgs at a high level at a level high enough to engage with the C-suite from day one, I always have to spend 6 months fighting my way into the rough neighborhood of the boardroom. I can kind of relate to that, but yeah, how do you manage with that, Aidan?
Well, that's actually a corporate secret. I'm not sure that I'm going to reveal it. One way to do that is to have a partner who's been in the C-suite for 25 years.
Yeah, it's kind of it's about credibility, isn't it? It's yeah, you could have all the content knowledge, but unless you know the right people or see us hanging around the right circles, yeah, I can go along with that as well.
Typical.
Hope that answers. So just digging into this, right? Because when you talked about operating model in the book, you mentioned Michael Porter's approach to the operating models. Sorry, and then you had your own map where you basically could find what you called the fault lines in the organization. So you had this model, it was kind of like a wheel, and like there's like concentric circles, and you got the middle, and you kind of keep going out and out and out. And you had this, I think during the transformation sprint, you draw that model and you show like little blobs in it where the organization isn't doing well. Can you tell us more about that, Hayden?
Yeah, but we need simplified ways to represent operating models. Um,
Mm.
the Porter operating model was really simple. If you remember, it was five chunks along the bottom, which were things like, you take raw materials in, or you take something in, like a component or set of components. You
Yeah.
convert that to something else. You have to sell it, then you've got to distribute it, and then you've got your after sales. And of course, companies don't work that way, never have done. But it was a simplified version of what happens. And what
Mm.
we've tried to do with those concentric circles is say, um, it, in the very centre, what you've got is strategy, and around that you've got your core platforms, or you've got those platforms, those software platforms usually that allow allow a company to function. Um, Two things can go wrong at that stage, and it's worth just pausing for a second to think about that. Strategy is usually refers to also the operating model that's going to get you that strategy. So if you look at one of the examples we gave, it was a company that was in retail, or it worked through retail partners, large retail partners. In the meantime, what it had also done is developed a digital capability. And in that digital capability, it was first of all e-commerce, but over time, m-commerce. So it's very much trying to work through mobile operators. And at the same time, it had tried a platform and ecosystem model. It had tried to develop an ecosystem of independent retailers. So here you have a strategy to move to a new operating model based around things like mobile commerce and platforms. Around that, what you have are those core platforms that I just mentioned that are mostly geared around the original company goals, which are working through large retailers. So your IT department and your infrastructure is serving that area of strategy. You can start to deploy resources, as BMW is going to do with mobility, towards the digital mobile and towards the digital platform ecosystem parts of your strategy. The problem is that as soon as the left-hand side, old retail, runs into any kind of difficulty, you're going to be dragging people over from m-commerce and from platforms. So you get the worst impact of context switching in your new business lines, your new business areas, your new strategy. And you never effectively make the transformation because those become expendable resources. So what we're trying to do with the diagram is say, at the core, do you have a transition to a new operating model that is going to be sufficiently protected and is going to actually allow you to grow new core platform capabilities? So you're not forever trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. Around that, you then need, if I can, I have very bad eyesight, John, so even though I'm looking at my own book, I don't, so you've got the core platforms. Around that, you have a series of capabilities that, a number of ecosystem activities. And some of those ecosystem activities, I think, are central to what new operating models need to do. And you might remember from the courses you attended that even when we look at product, we talk about the ecosystem. What ecosystem is going to help me to deliver on this? If you look at some of the best companies out there. I'll give you a quick example. Singles Day this year, Alibaba reached sales of 580,000 per second at peak. How do they do that? How do they get so many sales? And even in normal times, they can get up to 300,000 sales per second. Part of the reason is they're an ecosystem of influencers who use the Alibaba platform to stream content. So they stream content about products. If I'm a Chinese influencer on the Alibaba platform, I might be streaming information about household goods. I might be getting sponsored by those household goods manufacturers to do it. But the ability I have to draw people in to look at my stream and then to buy is to do with me. That's part of the ecosystem. If you look at an Airbnb, part of the ecosystem is those companies that are creating letting management software so that people can manage their Airbnb properties. So the ecosystem becomes more and more important. And if you don't think about that in your operating model development, you're going to be that company that tries to do everything itself. And if the best companies in the world and the most modern and the best advised companies in the world are not doing it all themselves, they are relying on ecosystems, you need to be thinking about that ecosystem circle. Around that, again, you have a range of capabilities, all the new capabilities that it takes to do mobile commerce, content production in a live streaming world, or the kinds of things that you need to do to develop ecosystem management or to stimulate new activity around you. Those are the new capabilities. So what we're trying to do with the concentric circles is say, in the middle, here's your strategy. Here are the different operating models the strategy is generating around you. Here are the core platforms that are supporting or not supporting that. Here are the ecosystems of customers and partners that are going to help you succeed or not succeed. And here are all the new capabilities that you need. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And that diagram of this concentric circles with the fault lines or the blobs, like where you kind of show where there's structural problems, is that something that you present at the playback, or do you present it somewhere else?
Oh no, that's what you present at playback.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an evolving thing actually, because when you're trying to describe somebody's current state, it's actually quite difficult to do that because a lot of organizations don't have very coherent operating models. They are not like the Porsche operating model, as you wouldn't expect them to be, because that was written 30 years ago. So that's quite difficult to describe or to represent diagrammatically what a company's operating model currently is. But it's much easier to say what it should be, because they can be much more, what's the right word for it? Representative. You're being much more abstract about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to address a couple of comments, and I just want to go back to Alibaba as well, Haydn, if that's okay. So Andrew has come in, and so our BMW example raises a huge shift for organizations and a reskilling, restructure of core competencies, transition into white space capability. Reminds you of the Hamel and Prahalad work version 2.0. I'm not familiar with that. Are you familiar with that work, Haydn?
So Hamel and I thought it was the other way around, Prahalad and Hamel, but it was very much about what is the core competency of the firm. And when you look into what the core competency of the firm is, it's quite an elastic concept. You might say that Steve Jobs might have said that Apple's core competency is actually miniaturization. By the time of the iPhone, he might have said the core competency is design, consumer design. But basically, you're looking at what are these competencies that differentiate you. And the reason for saying it in that way, for talking about a core competency like that, is to simplify it in the minds of the tens of thousands of people that are working for you. Because what you don't want is for everybody to think that their competency, the things that they're most interested in, are the things the firm should be most interested in. So you have a core competency. Over time, I would say what's been most noticeable about firms could be an argument we could have here, Andrew, or a discussion some other time. But I would say that from about 2005 onwards, the idea of core competency started to break down, because it was very much related to the fact that most organizations stayed within the industry sector boundaries. So when you were Apple and you were a computing company, you were in the sector of computing. your core competency with microprocessors and what you do with them. Once you got to mobile, you had this extraordinary shift where suddenly you weren't in mobile, you were in mobile and health. Or because you were a leader in operating systems and mobile, you were in autos, and you were in education. So suddenly core competency, I think, splintered. And now organizations have to have multiple competencies and have to make very considered decisions about which areas they're going into, because they can go into any area. And the whole thing, just getting back to the core competency idea, it was very much related to do not risk your company on adjacencies. Stay away from them. They're too difficult. Now companies have to do adjacencies.
Yeah.
So are we,
yeah,
in the BMW example, are we talking about reskilling, restructuring, core competencies? I think we're talking about that and a lot more. I think it's about going into the whole area of, say, stick with mobility. BMW is now into payments for parking or discovering parking places. There's a calculation that New York City wastes, or the people of New York City waste something like $4 billion a year just looking for parking spaces. And BMW is trying to do things around that. Can I help people to find parking spaces more easily? Once they're in there, can I give them a payment system for parking? So they're trying to do all these different things under the umbrella of that's all about mobility. I think they are already finding that that's not working very well, really, because they've already got out of not ride sharing, but car sharing. They were in car sharing along with Mercedes. They've got out of it. Probably need to reconsider their core competency and how they can develop and reskill, the way Andrew said. But the idea, the basic idea that sectors are dissolving and you need to be able to do lots of new things, that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, so Andrew is agreeing with you. Thank you very much for those comments, Andrew. Appreciate that. Comment from Chimpanzee. So is there going to be more content on the website? Would be good to see examples of charters, templates, VSMs, customer journey maps, and so on.
Yeah, well, are you on the GoAcademy.io website, or are you on the transformationsprint.com website? The transformationsprint.com.
Which one should he be on? Should it be on Transformation Sprint?
We're on the point of launching GoAcademy.io. So please make a note of that one. It might have launched. We'll work on it this afternoon. That's where we're going to be uploading the content. And yes, we're going to do those things. Actually, if you could tell us what you want to see on there, that would be great. And I saw you wanted customer journeys as well as charters. Yeah. If you drop us a comment on the site, we'll endeavour to do that.
Thank you very much, Haydn. And Matthew Evans has a question. Could it be said that companies are T-shaping?
That's Matthew from RBS up in Scotland. Good evening, Matthew. I think to some extent, I think of it more the other way around, an upside down T, that they were in the vertical and now they're sort of like that.
Okay, thank you. Haydn, you mentioned Alibaba a few times in the book. And I have to confess, the only time I really hear about Alibaba is when I talk to you, because you're so well traveled and you're so well up and all that. But maybe that's because I'm kind of hiding in a cave as well. A lot of us in the UK and Europe and United States and Canada would be very impressed by Amazon at the moment. And a few years ago, I remember when I was working in a UK bank, everybody was worried about Alibaba setting up a bank in the UK or something like that. And so the threat, or the potential threat of Alibaba for Amazon, is it real, or are they kind of just going in different directions, kind of living side by side?
So I think what's happening at the moment is a lot of young people are using Alibaba. They're not afraid of using Alibaba. And a lot of people are using Alibaba to source product to sell on Amazon. So at the moment, there's something of a...
it's like one's feeding the other.
Yeah, well, Alibaba's feeding Amazon at the moment, yeah. It's even possible right now to set things up so that you don't even have to touch your product. You source it from China through Alibaba, it goes to an Amazon fulfillment center, and it goes off to the customer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
In broader terms, though, yes, it's going to be really fascinating. I think that there are 10 platforms. Probably in 5 years' time, there will only be 10 major platforms, and most commerce will go through them. I think if you look now, you can think about this in terms of both Alibaba and Amazon. If you're out there with any kind of business and you're not selling through Amazon, you're losing customers. You are in effect seeing something that is a re-intermediation. Whilst the web should have disintermediated stuff, it's now re-intermediating through Amazon. You have to go through Amazon. You have to be selling some of your stuff through Amazon.
Okay, comment there from Adam Morgan saying he noticed a flood of poor products on Amazon. I actually had 2 computer devices that I'm having to return. Yeah, but I'm not sure if that was just an odd thing.
I might find the way all the way back to
China. Just watching the time here, Haydn, and so like in your book, you talk about the transformation sprint, very much modeled on the Google Design Sprint. You have a clear set of workshops over the month that you engage with the client. The whole purpose of the transformation sprint is getting people to align on what the issues are, using your own kind of X-ray to see what's really going on, playing back a generative operating model that could be created that kind of should be where you might want to go. And then what you do is but basically they set up a high-powered team, but a descaled team, like with a lot of the right people, the right influencers, getting together from all functions and all value streams to get them together to work on this lighthouse project to basically find a way forward. And I was wondering if you could give us a few examples of some really good lighthouse projects that resulted that came out at the end of Transformation Sprint.
Yeah, I'm going to give you 2 examples. But the first example I'll give you is that it's nothing to do with Transformation Sprint, but it's one of the learnings that we had when we were writing it. And that would be Amazon around about 2003. In the early days of Amazon, it had no coherent IT strategy. So per country and per product line or per major product category, they were building their own systems. And then they were asked by companies like Marks and Spencer's, could Amazon run the e-commerce function for Marks and Spencer's? And the answer to that would have been, we would love to, but we can't because we don't have a system for it. And they then set off on a number of lighthouse projects where they started to bring bits and pieces of the fragmented IT infrastructure together. Obviously, that's not something you do overnight. You do it bit by bit. That actually is what led to AWS. And of course, AWS is one of the most influential, perhaps one of the most profitable companies in the world. So it's things like that, those kinds of examples that inspired us to think in terms of the lighthouse. Another example, just in passing, would be the work that Finn was doing at Paddy Power when they re-platformed there. They had 7 platforms. The way they re-platformed was to take small segments of the business and see what it would take to re-platform a small part of the business, learn what it took to do that, and then set out the next step. So the next, from greyhound racing to the next type of business. One of the things that we did that is very much about our learnings from doing it in the kind of structured way that we suggest was that the company that we mentioned in the example of something suddenly finding itself with 3 strategies and 3 operating models. So what we did in that particular case was to propose to scale it all down, not just to one product. First of all, yes, we scaled it down to one product, but we scaled it down to one channel, Instagram, and we scaled it down to one time of the year, autumn. So we did a full product design on that product, but what we were trying to do was to actually get people, just to expand on the example a little bit, this company had a catalogue of 4,000 products that it was displaying through mobile phones. And it hadn't done an awful lot to make that an experience worth having. what that also means is when you have experiences that are quite poor in a visual environment, you end up being tempted into discounting. So the catalogue was difficult to navigate, and the only temptation you would have to get you to navigate it was a 40% discount on those products. So we were saying, okay, let's have one product, let's just use one channel, let's use one time of the year, and get everybody to learn what it means to create a customer journey for a product in a mobile environment.
Okay, and there's a danger though with these lighthouse projects. I mean, I wouldn't have had other examples before. The danger can be that number one, they make it too big, but you kind of address that in the book that you want it to be a really small team, and if it gets bigger, you can spawn off later on. That's fine. But what can happen a lot as well is that change gets delegated. So like I often hear, for example, oh, we're going digital, so you've got a chief digital officer, or we're going agile, so we've got a chief agile officer, and basically the change is just delegated away, and it's like the CEO doesn't have to worry about it anymore. Have you seen any of that with these lighthouse projects? Like, you get the high powered team at the start. Have you seen situations where the energy just peters out after a while, and how have you handled that when you've seen that happening?
I think that what happens in all companies is executive teams delegate decision making, and that's the problem. What we're trying to do with the lighthouse is to get them to prioritize. That doesn't mean that they're going to make decisions. They'll always delegate the decision, and there are a number of reasons for that. If you were cynical, it'd say so that they've got somebody to blame if it goes wrong. But actually, when it comes down to it, if you're going to do a lighthouse project, you need to prove value in the lighthouse project. If you prove value and you prove value frequently, and you have a show and tell opportunity, and that's something that we try and write into that charter, that they are demonstrating what they're doing, then it can maintain momentum. I think there's a kind of fact of life of companies, large or medium size, which is that nothing ever changes completely. And if you've got a successful lighthouse project, you can start to scale it around. The chances are, though, that you will still get people who want to work in a waterfall environment and will distort their Scrum working practice to make them. And whatever comes out of the lighthouse project is not going to change this reality. The best you can aim for inside companies is to have a diverse range of ways to work, and make the case over time that one of those is becoming more successful and should expand. But I don't think we should. Don't think any of us should delude ourselves that you can go in and make a change that sticks, spreads.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, if I was to summarize with the people watching, one of the things that I really got out of this was there's a lot of frameworks, as you said, in the agile world and so on, and even in LESS, I'm a member of the LESS community, and we have an overall retrospective, and so issues that are beyond the span of control of the teams, we need like business people and IT people working together, or even people in other functions and so on, working together, reporting problems. And I really see the transformation sprint as filling a gap, because what happens to those things that are reported that are out of the span of control of the teams, the things that need the executives to pull together cross-functionally to problems that need to be solved. And I see it as a really good way of kind of pulling the situation together, getting some momentum within a month, and creating something concrete at the end of a month, and then they can decide whether they want to go forward. Am I positioning it right, Haydn, or would you put it slightly differently?
Well, I think that's the objective. I think that the missing ingredient in most transformations is business acumen. And can we get that comment up? There's one comment come in there which might be relevant to this.
The Michael Sahota one?
The one at the very top there, some interesting references to Sahota's ideas in the emerging operating model. Triggering me. I don't know Sahota. I think there are many emerging operating models rather than just one. We do talk about emerging operating models. And we have given examples in the book about how the legacy people in the legacy structure can react against things that are going on. but they're not reacting against an emerging operating model. They're reacting against the way they're being treated. And very often what you see when you look at what's going on is there'll be references to legacy as if that's almost our problem and that's our waste of time. But those people are busy working on that legacy and keeping the business going. And when they hear that language, they do react. And there are many other reasons why they react. And I don't think it's an immune response. I think it's a very logical human thing. But I think that the problem, and that is one problem, and there are many other problems which we have documented in the book. Over and above all that, there is the fact that we have a new business environment. It's being reshaped by companies like Amazon. It's now going to be shaped by recession after COVID. It's being reshaped by mobile and other things. My take on this is that most companies that I've encountered don't develop their business acumen. They can latch on to things like design sprints or business model innovation or whatever that fad is, but they don't actually get back to some of those things that people like Prahalad and Hammer were saying, which is you've got to fundamentally learn about how to do business in a new way with new operating models. And that's a hard job to do. Most executives are not up to it and they don't want to do it. And therefore they will take shortcuts.
Do you think that's why the likes of McKinsey are so successful, Haydn? Because one of the things they do is they try to specialize in different sectors, don't they? And they try to send in consultants who understand that sector well. Do you think that's the reason why they get so much business?
I think that totally different. It's a totally different topic. It's a different topic, but what you see with the consultancies is a reflection of the short lifespan of senior executives. They've got to come in, they've got to take an initiative, make an impression, and get on to the next CEO role. Or if the CIOs, they've got 2 years nowadays.
The merry-go-round.
18 months. If you've got those kind of timescales to work within, go and get yourself a really good consultancy because they're going to help you have impact. Fact is, you work with them at your last job, bring them with you. I don't think it's the right way to do it. I don't think it helps develop anybody's business acumen, but the development of business acumen is a really serious shortcoming in transformation work.
There's a couple of comments just came in there. So don't want to do it due to risk against a longer payback. They personally don't see the reward in the light. Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah. Adam is kind of saying snap. You're agreeing exactly. But I think the point that you're making, Haydn, is it's not just like people like myself, agility practitioners, it's not just about learning about the industry that you're in or learning about the work that the people you work with. So I'm in marketing and sales in FMCG, for example. It's not just about learning about their work and learning about their industry. It's also about learning about how businesses work and how operating models work. Is that what you mean?
Well, I think that's about 2/3 of it. There's another chunk which is coming up, and it's something that relates to, again, going back to the value discovery course that you attended. What we were trying to say there is software as a service models have forced us to think much more about customer lifetime value. That's a bad term. Customer success is a better one. They've really pushed this idea that you need to help customers succeed. And if you don't have a range of services or an integration of services that help your customers succeed, you're going to have to keep trying to sell to them or sell to somebody else. So what we're seeing is companies are moving towards the subscription models and revenue models, sometimes ill-advisedly, but they're doing it because they want to build a lifetime relationship. Prime is a fantastic example of business of the future, because what Amazon does with Prime is gives you more and more and more value all the time at the same price. Google is the same. Google gives away now about 50 different products like Docs and Sheets and those types of things, YouTube, but it's doing it because it wants a relationship with you for the rest of your life. And if you're not thinking that way, if you don't have the business acumen to understand the impact of these platforms taking customers and living with them, if you don't see that that's going to erode everything that you're doing, you don't have the business acumen to make a transformation work, because basically you're going to be pointing it in the wrong direction. So that's what I mean, as well as we all need new ways to work. but we need a new way to think about business, and we need a new way to think about relationships with customers.
Thank you very much, Haydn. I really, really enjoyed reading the book, and I don't say this lightly, but I think it's a must read for anybody in my space, anybody involved in any big change. I think the sweet spot is if the change isn't going so well, or you're just about to start and you can't figure out how to kind of get traction. It's a great vehicle for making inroads and doing something tangible. What I love about it, it's actionable. It deals with complexity as well. It does allow for that, but it's got kind of clear steps, and there's really good insights in the book as well. And I have to say, I was very impressed by the draft operating model, concentric circles. And sorry, I don't have the image, but if you read the book, you can see it all for yourself. There's a website as well, of course. The transformationsprint.com. I think I had it on the captions a while ago. So make sure you check it out, the transformationsprint.com. And Haydn, you said there's a new website as well, right?
Flowacademy.io.
Flowacademy.io. So check that out as well. A couple of more comments just before we wrap up. Andrew was asking, do I use StreamYard? I used to use StreamYard. It's very good. I really like it. But because I use Restream.io for my RTMP, I decided to just bundle it. So I guess they've now set up a relationship with me, and now they've got I'm doing that as well. So I had some ropey episodes, but I'm getting used to Restream.io now. If it's good enough for the World Health Organization, it's good enough for me, I think. So thank you for that question. David has come in. Hey, Haydn, have you used Flow transformation sprints to integrate concepts around CSR and positive social environmental outcomes?
No, the answer to that is no. We were about to do that on March 18th. The world came to a stop. But we'd love to. We also think there's massive scope for COVID resets using transformation sprints. So anybody who's out there thinking, you're in the public sector, you're in policy, you're in city management, I think transformation sprints is going to really help with your reset.
Okay, thank you. And follow-up comment as well. It appears the capitalist model may itself be disrupted by regulation shortly. Wondering if you think that's a likely outcome for companies.
I think it's already happened.
Yeah. And Andre saying, thank you a lot for a lot of info to think about. And Andrew says, thank you as well. Any final thoughts, Haydn? If you were to kind of like summarize why people should read this book and why they should talk to you and Finn, what would you say to them?
Well, I think we've lost a year. At the start of COVID, people were saying that transformation is accelerated. I think that's not, actually. I think that now people are gearing up for change. So given the fact that we've got the vaccines, there'll be a lot of change. And I think it's going to come thick and fast in the new year. And it's got to be fast. Therefore, transformation sprints should be your Bible.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in the week where a couple of large UK retailers are finding it difficult, it's kind of a real sign that it's not just business models we need operating models. And it's not like as is to be, it's like as is where we think we should be, and some way we can learn to find a new operating model later and have a longer relationship with the customer. Haydn, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and thanks everyone for your engagement and for your comments. Really enjoyed it. The next show is tomorrow evening. Myself, Andy Hiles, and Daniel Vacanti will be talking about Kanban Guide, which was published in July. So looking forward to talking to you about Kanban Guide and Pro Kanban, which is the new qualification, if you like, for Kanban, professional Kanban. Haydn, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Over and out, everyone. Good night.